how are you? I hope you're doing well. I will be live today, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. I have to remind myself what side of the country I'm on now. But this video, I wanted to talk about critical race theory. And we've been talking about it a lot lately, and a lot of headway has been made. When I first heard about critical race theory, it was a few years ago, and it was really shocking that this was allowed to be taught in schools. It's basically, it's sort of similar to the 1619 Project, and it tells kids that basically if you are white, you're an oppressor. If you are not white, you are inherently oppressed. And it teaches a lot about slavery, but not in the sense where it was taught when I was in school. It teaches a lot of identity politics, sort of separatism, and just a lot of things that a lot of people don't agree with, and they feel like it's indoctrinating their children. And we're going to get into that more, but it's starting to be taught more and more and more in public schools and in universities, even with companies. We had, you have Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book White Fragility. We've talked about that before. And you had companies like Coca-Cola, who we've talked about has a training that piggybacks off Robin DiAngelo, and it teaches people how to be less white, that anything whiteness is inherently bad and inherently racist, and that America is a racist nation. Just all of those things is basically what critical race theory teaches. And I think it sort of went under the radar for a while, because I honestly think that most people that understand what CRT is and that understand what it teaches, I think would be against it. But where I think you have the problem is most people don't know exactly what it is, and it's sort of being framed as diversity. It's diversity training. It's, teaching people their history and their past. And that's really not what it is. It's propaganda, and it's not even a lot of the times factually accurate. But people are starting to fight back, and you have Idaho. I know the governor in Idaho signed a bill banning CRT. President Trump actually signed an executive order banning CRT in schools and government offices, but that's one of the first things that Biden reversed when he got in office. But now people are starting to fight back on a smaller level, and this person, Christopher Rufo, I think that's how you say his last name. So I've been following him for a while, and he actually put together a legal group, a group of lawyers, so that regular, everyday parents, employees, who, no matter who it is, can reach out to these people for basically help if they want to move forward and sue. Because CRT, when you're discriminating based on race, that is also against the law. It goes to 1864 Civil Rights Act, where you are not allowed to discriminate anyone based on race. And that is exactly what CRT does. It teaches people to discriminate and to focus on race. I'm going to read you parts of this letter. So this is an open letter that a father wrote, and he pulled his daughter out of Brearley, is that how you pronounce it? Brearley School, which is a very, very expensive, high-to-do school in New York. I believe Drew Barrymore went there. A lot of other celebrities and famous people went there. Chelsea Clinton went there. So this is a very expensive, very elitist school, and he pulled his daughter out because of CRT and wrote an open letter to the school. So I'm going to read you a little bit of that. I thought it was really interesting, and then that's it. But first, this is what's happening in Tennessee. So we just heard Tennessee's jumping on the bandwagon. Breaking: the Tennessee State House passes a bill banning critical race theory indoctrination in public schools. The legislation, which moves to the Senate, would prohibit schools from promoting race essentialism, collective guilt, and state-sanctioned racism. The fight is on. So that's Christopher. If you want to follow him, you might be able to use him as a resource. Maybe one day down the road. So he announced that today, and then this was announced today too. Breaking: Arizona State House passes a bill banning critical race theory indoctrination in public schools. To see what other people are saying about CRT right now. This was in Newsweek, and this was just the other day that this was posted in Newsweek, and it says ban CRT Theory Now, and this is an opinion piece by Max Eden. I don't even know who this is, but he says many parents might not yet understand what CRT is. The ideology has gone by a number of names in recent years: identity politics, intersectionality, wokeness. Academics have generated convoluted justifications and rationalizations for it. Journalists have crafted still narratives to promote it. But at its core in practice, CRT amounts to institutionalized racial hatred. When Paul Rossi, a high school teacher at Manhattan's Grace Church School, objected to CRT at his school, the lead teacher admitted, "We are demonizing white people for being born." Robin DiAngelo, author of best-selling White Fragility, argues that all whites are inherently racist. Bettina Love, an education professor, has written in Education Week that white teachers need a particular type of therapy to address their white emotionalities and to undo whiteness in education. Nicole Hannah-Jones, author of the New York Times CRT-infused The 1619 Project, has plainly stated that her project's deepest ambition is to get white Americans to stop being white. So, this is what they are teaching in schools to young elementary school-aged children. Basically, this article goes on to say, if you can't even begin to imagine how perverse this is, go ahead and switch the races on a lot of what we just said. Just go ahead and do that for a second. And what would happen if you did that? What would you be calling that in the reverse if you did that? And again, you teaching these things is against the law, but I don't think people really knew what to do with it. They didn't know what it was, and a lot of people don't have the means or the resources to be able to actually take action. And what we've seen in the past is a lot of kids that stand up, or parents that stand up, or fellow teachers that stand up, oftentimes will get shunned and bullied and called all kinds of names. Now, another thing that they will try to do to basically silence any criticism of CRT is they'll say, oh, well, you don't agree with things that teach about slavery or teach that history of slavery. And look, I only went to one public school, so I know one public school, but I went to public school in Georgia. And I was always taught about the history of slavery. Not only were we taught it in school, that history was all around us. I learned about it in school very well. My teachers taught about it. School isn't already teaching that. And if they aren't, that would be a specific problem with that specific school. And they would probably need to look back at their curriculum. But now to this letter, and I'm just going to read you a few parts of it. It's really interesting. The entire thing is linked below. And this is Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss is a journalist, and actually a real journalist who stands up for freedom of speech. She's the one that posted this. And just to give you a little backstory, so the father that wrote this, he is not re-enrolling his daughter in this school. So it's Brearley School. It's an all-private girls' school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It costs about $54,000 a year. And apparently, to be enrolled in the school, you have to do an anti-racism pledge. Okay, so let's read this letter from the dad that pulled his daughter out. That's not going to be re-enrolling her. Family recently made the decision not to re-enroll our daughter at Brearley for the 21-22 school year. She has been at Brearley for 7 years, beginning in kindergarten. In short, we no longer believe that Brearley's administration and board of trustees have any of our children's best interest at heart. Moreover, we no longer have confidence that our daughter will receive the quality of education necessary to further her development into a critically thinking, responsible, enlightened, and civic-minded adult. I write you, as a fellow parent, to share our reasons for leaving Brearley community, but also to urge you to act before the damage to the school, to its community, and your own child's education is irreparable. It cannot be stated strongly enough that Brearley's obsession with race must stop. It should be abundantly clear to say any thinking parent that Brearley has completely lost its way. The administration and board of trustees has displayed a cowardly, appalling lack of leadership by appeasing an anti-intellectual, illiberal mob and then allowing the school to be captured by that same mob. What follows are my own personal views on Brearley's anti-racism initiatives, but these are just a handful of criticisms that I know other parents have expressed. I object to the view that I should be judged by the color of my skin. I cannot tolerate a school that not only judges my daughter by the color of her skin, but encourages and instructs her to prejudge others by theirs. By viewing every element of education, every aspect of history, and every facet of society through the lens of skin color and race, we are desecrating the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and utterly violating the movement for which such civil rights leaders believed, fought, and died. If the administration was genuinely serious about diversity, it would not insist on the indoctrination of its students and their families to single mindset most reminiscent of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Instead, the school would foster an environment of intellectual openness and freedom of thought. And if Brearley really cared about inclusiveness, the school would return to the concepts encapsulated in the motto, One Brearley, instead of teaching the extraordinarily divisive idea that there are only and always two groups in this country, victims and oppressors. So I guess this school had been teaching this type of thing and pressuring their students and parents to become BLM activists. And a lot of the parents, not just him, were really upset about this. So he decided to go ahead and do it, pull his daughter out, and write that letter to the school and other parents. And here you have one more example of this elitist institution, which costs $54,000 a year to go to. And those are the ones that are pushing these things. Sort of like what we talk about. It's that upper middle class sort of liberal who pushes all of these things like CRT, racial division, and this obsession with race. These are typically people that are so far removed from it, and they end up pushing things that actually hurt society. School that is pushing diversity, equity, inclusion is one of the hardest schools to get into and the most expensive in New York. How ironic. If they're so worried about inclusion, maybe they should lighten up their admissions. But again, it's usually the most elite that push this stuff. And the reason they push this stuff is because they are the farthest removed and have no idea what they're actually doing and talking about. And instead of teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, teaching kids how to go off and be successful adults, they're teaching kids to be little political activists with no skills. Meanwhile, in China, they're pushing reading, writing, arithmetic, and things like that. We're the ones that aren't. I thought that letter was really interesting. Let me know what you guys think about everything, and I'll see you later tonight. Bye.